This is G, and this is what we did last time. And I told you guys that in order to factor out G, the first thing we need to do is we need to take the A term, and in our case, the A term is the 33 multiplied to the C term, and in this case, we will get 132. And I told you guys that the AC method, this is the tedious of the AC method, when you take the A times the C and you get this humongous number. But no matter how humongous number, you can always take your calculator and find the multiple, right? Take 132, divide this by 1, divided by 2, divide by 3, divide by 4, divide by 5, and this is what we have. And again, we did this yesterday, so let's take a look at H. The reason why I mentioned this is because H is very identical to H. I mean G, right? So what do we have here? If you take a look at H, in the center, we still have the two number. We still have 33 times 4, and we still have a positive 132. But now what do we need to do? Well, we need to ask ourselves, is that two number multiplied to give me 132, but add together to give me 23? And the reason why I mentioned this is hopefully you guys see that the multiple of 132 is the same. The multiple of 132 is 1 times 132, 2 times 66, 3 times 44, 4 times 33, 6 times 22, and 11 times 12. So which two of this number multiply to give you 132, but add together to give you 23? Well, 11 times 12 is 132, and 11 plus 12 is 23, right? So looking at that, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a look at H down here. Even if they ask you to solve, this is what we need to do is we identify this item, right? We did this prior to this problem. We multiply this thing here, we get 132, and we tell ourselves that 11 times 12 is 132, and 11 plus 12 is 23. So what do? Before we can do any solving item, we need to factor this out. And to factor this out, the only thing we need to do is we need to rewrite this problem. And to rewrite this problem, instead of writing 23, we need to break it down in terms of the 11 and the 12. Because eventually 11y plus the 12y, that will give you 23y, right? So we changed the look of the problem, but we have not changed the problem itself, because once we do this, once we have this, remember we need to group them up. We need to factor out by grouping, and we need to group this thing up. And if we group this item in the first group, everybody see that 11. In the first group, everybody see that 11 and 33, we can take out 11, and there is a y that is in common. We can take it out. And once we take this out, do you see that 11 go to 33 is 3 times, a y go to y squared is y times. And again, 11 go to 11 is 1, and y, we took it out, there is no longer a y. So we have 3y plus 1. And similarly, in this 12 and 4, because I include a positive, I need to take it out, and a positive 4 going to 12 to give me 3y, and 4 going to 4 to give me 1. And again, this is what we want. The item in my parenthesis is the same, which is 3y plus 1. I bring it to the outside. And the leftover, what is the leftover? The leftover is 11 plus 4. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is our factor. So in order for us to solve, again, look at this thing here, we haven't solved it yet. What we just did was we factor, and that's what we spent a lot of time all the time of yesterday to do is factor this thing out. And now to show you that to solve this thing here, once you factor out, the only thing that to solve this is you say 3y plus 1 is equal to 3y plus 1 is equal to 0. You take the first parenthesis and you set it equal to 0. You take the second parenthesis and you set it equal to 0. And again, that's all that is new in chapter 6.6. How do we solve this thing here? We need to subtract 1 over. And if I subtract 1 over, I have 3y equal to negative 1. And what do I do with the 3? I need to divide by 3. So therefore, 3y equal to negative 1. I divide this by 3. My y is equal to negative 1/3. So one of my answer is y equal to negative 1/3. And again, the other one, what do I need to do? Well, the other one, same idea go. I need to subtract 4. If I subtract 4 to the other side, I have 11y equal to negative 4. And 11y equal to negative 4. To get rid of the 11, I need to divide. And if I divide on one side, I need to divide to the other side. Excuse me, divide to the other side, which is the two answer I have is y equal to negative 1/3. And the other answer is y equal to negative 4/11, right? So those are your two answers. So the reason I emphasize this is I want to show you that solving is not hard. Solving is what we've been doing, is how do we get to the solving part. And that's what we need to have, right? And again, similarly, I purposely give you all of this number in the same token, right? All of this number, we have 33 multiplied to this number. If you take 33 multiplied to negative 4, you will get a negative. You will get a negative 132. And now, why do I emphasize a negative? Because in this case, we need to think in terms of subtraction. And to do this thing here, reminder, what is 133, 132? Well, 132, we have 1 times 132, 2 times 66, 3 times 44, 4 times 33, and 6 times 22, 11 times 12. To reminder that this is what you do is you take 132 divided by 2, 132 divided by 3, 132 divided by 4, 132 divided by 5. You will not get a whole number. 132 divided by 6, so on so forth until you get 132 divided by 11. And the next number you would divide by 12, you get the same number back. So when you repeat it, there's no more multiple. So now in this case, is there two number multiply to give me 132, but subtract to give me 41? And hopefully you guys say, well, Mr. Tran, we got this right here. 44 minus 3 will give me 41. And 44 minus 3, do you agree that this is what I need to do? I need to break down the 44 and the 3. Which one is positive and which one is negative? Reminder, because we think in terms of subtraction, one of them is positive and one of them is negative. The bigger number will get the sign of the middle term. In this case, the middle term is negative. So the bigger number is negative, and this item will be positive. So we have a positive 3. Let me erase this thing here. We have a positive 3 and a negative 44. Because negative 44 plus 3 will give me a negative 41. And once we have this thing here, all we need to do is to bring down our item, which is 33z to the second power and the 4. Everything else is the same, right? Solving, again, if this thing is confuse you, if the 0 confuse you, don't worry about the 0. Just know that you will bring down the 0 at the end, right? So just factor out for now. And to factor this thing out, everybody see that we need to group them up. And if I group them up in the first group, do you agree that I can take out a 3 and a z? because 3 going to 33 will give me 11 times, and 3 going to 3 will give me 1 time. And looking at this thing here, in the second group, because I include a negative, I need to take out a -4, and -4 go to -4 will give me a positive 11. A -4 go to -4 will give me a positive 1. And as you can see, the item in my parenthesis is the same. I take it out, 11z plus 1, and the leftover is 3z minus 4. And again, this is where you put the 0 in, right? This is where, because all you do is because they ask you to solve, so the only thing is they basically tell you that at the end is equal to 0. And looking at this thing here, ladies and gentlemen, all of this number are different, right? This down here, we have 11 plus 1, 11z plus 1, 3z minus 4. Up here, we have 3, 1, and 11, 4, which is different parenthesis. And this up here, we have 33, 4, and x1. So all of these 3 items are different because of the middle term, okay? So once we have this thing here, just remind you, once we have this thing here, the only thing we need to do is take the first item, 11z plus 1, set it equal to 0. Take the second item, 3z minus 4, equal to 0. Take each of your parentheses, set it equal to 0, and solve for z. And in this case, to solve for z, I need to subtract 1. 11z equal to -1. I divide by 11 to give me z equal to -1 over 11. On this side, I need to add 4. I have 3z equal to 4 divided by 3. I have z equal to 4 over 3. So this is my 2 answer. We're looking for 2 answer. And this is the 2 answer we have, okay? And I told you guys, yesterday before I let you guys go, I told you guys that solving, hopefully you guys see that solving is the easiest, among other things, solving is the easiest one because factoring is probably the hardest, right? Solving, once you set it equal to 0, you just move everything to the other side, and that's what we've been doing, okay? So first of all, question with this thing here, question with this item that we have. Any question with the step or the procedure here? And again, everything we did is here, like I mentioned, we factor everything out, and like I asked you guys, or I told you guys last time, the only thing that they ask you to do is solving is, again, basically everything you have, you just take this, each of your factor, each of your parentheses and set it equal to 0, right? Everything is the same. All you do is you take the parentheses and set it equal to 0 and solve for whatever the letter that they give you, okay? So question with the solving item here, ladies and gentlemen. Well, if you don't have question, let's cover the last item we have. And the last item we have is 6.7. So if you take a look at this item here, 6.7, and 6.7 is probably, among other things, probably the hardest material for you guys. The reason is we are dealing with word problem. And I know how you guys love word problem, and that's why you don't want to see it, right? But again, let's go over this thing here. Let's go over this item. I want to point out that there are 2 word problems that you will have. There are 2 word problems that you will have in this 6.2. I mean 6.7. So one type of word problem will be involved of the equation, or most of the problem will be involved the height. Sometimes the profit or the height is the same, but in order for you, I list this thing here. This is the 2 type of word problem you will have, which is the height problem and the right triangle problem. So if you have the height problem, this is the step that you want to, or this is the step that you need to do. the first step you need to do is take whatever the height equation is, or whatever the profit equation, you take that equation and you set it equal to 0. And once you set it equal to 0, all you need to do is solve that equation by factor. And most of the time, most of the problem, you can factor out the GCF, and the GCF is mostly the negative number in front of the x squared. Once you factor out GCF, you will have a remainder inside your parenthesis, and then you once again factor that item. And after you factor, which as you can see, that's why I told you chapter 6 is hard, because if you don't know how to factor, none of this problem, you cannot start any of this problem if you don't know how to factor. Okay. And then after you factor, all you need to do is set the item equal to 0 and then solve for the unknown. Okay. And when we get there, you will see why we need to eliminate the negative number, and why do we need to keep the positive number. Okay. But that's the idea. That's the step. We set it equal to 0, we factor out, and then we solve. Okay. So that's your height problem, and it's very height, not high, your height problem. The other type of problem that you have is the right triangle problem. And again, this is the only 2 problems that you will encounter in 6.7, which if they mention anything about the right triangle, we are dealing with the right triangle. And in order for you to solve the right triangle, this is what you need to do, is you need to identify, draw a figure, identify your legs, which is the vertical item, and your horizontal item. The hypotenuse, which is your diagonal line, that is your hypotenuse. So all you do is you identify your legs, which is leg A and leg B, and the hypotenuse will always be my C term. And then once you identify it, you need to plug into this Pythagorean theorem, which is, again, the Pythagorean theorem just basically tell you that A squared plus B squared is equal to C squared. The 2 legs square, add them together, will give you the square of the hypotenuse. And again, the Pythagorean prove this item that it will always be the same. And once you have that, the only thing we need to do is we need to FOIL them out because of the square, combine like term, and then solve for x. To solve for x, because there's an x square, every time we have an x square, we need to factor. Okay, so this is the idea, the rough draft, the rough idea, and I will post this on Canvas tonight. And again, this is the rough steps and the procedure that you need to do. Let's take a look at the problem. The problem that you will see, which is the height problem, not the high problem, sorry. The height problem that you have is this right here. As you can see, this item, they give you a bottle rocket is launched, whatever the equation they tell you, they say that the equation, the height. So whenever the height problem, this is our height problem, okay? And we will go over this, but let's take a look at, give me the other one. The other one you will see is something like this. The other one you will see is something they mention is one leg of the right triangle. So if they say right triangle, we are dealing with the right triangle problem. If the other one is pretty much, it's either the height or the profit. Okay. So again, in this item here, in this item, we have to write or draw our right triangle out. Okay. But let's go back, or let's do this one item at a time, right? So let's do the height problem. So let's take a look at this thing here. So let's say if you run into this problem over this weekend, what do we do, or how do we do this problem? So if you remember what I mentioned, or if you remember the step that I had before, I told you that looking at this thing here, the only thing that you have, And again, this is what they tell you is the bio rocket is launched on top of the 64-foot building. The equation of the height of the rocket above the ground is given by h equal to a negative 16t squared plus 48t plus 64, where t is the time in second. In how many seconds will the rocket hit the ground? So again, that's the idea is you stand or someone stand on the top of a building and they launch this rocket and this will shoot up the air. And now they ask you, how long will the rocket hit the ground? So looking at all of this thing here, as I mentioned, or if you remember, this is what they tell you, or this is the only equation that we have. And the equation that we have, and if you remember, or this is what you do, this is all that you do is you just take that equation, because everything else is just the story behind this equation here. So all you need to do, this is what I tell you guys to do, is take this equation and set it equal to 0. All you need to do is whatever your equation is, you take this equation and you set it equal to 0. And look at this thing here. This is our problem, ladies and gentlemen. Our problem, remember, our standard quadratic equation is something like this, right? Something x squared plus bx plus c equal to 0. And again, we have some square here, some no square, some constant, and the 0. So this follow everything that we needed, or this follow the quadratic equation that we have. Okay, so in order for us to do this item, the first step, like I mentioned on the previous slide, the first step is you take your equation, whatever equation they give you. If they give you the equation, take that equation and set it equal to 0. Once you set it equal to 0, you need to factor out a GCF. And again, if you factor out a GCF, meaning between the 16, the 48, and the 64, do they have a common divider? And like I mentioned, most of the time you have to take that negative number out, because we want to, or you haven't seen any t square, in this case, t square have a negative. So looking at this thing here, we can take our GCF, and the GCF here will be a negative 16. Why? Because negative 16 going to negative 16 will give me t squared. Basically, it's positive 1, but I don't need to write a positive 1 in front of the t. It's assumed to be there. So again, this is what I have is t squared. A negative going to a positive will give me a negative. 48 divided by 16 will give me 3t. And then 64 divided by 16, this will give me 4, and a positive go into or divided by a negative number, this will give me a negative. So this is the first step I told you, is to set it equal to 0, and then to factor out a GCF. Once you factor out a GCF, now our focusing point will be in this parenthesis. Is there anything in this parenthesis that I can take out or I can factor out? Meaning, look at this thing here. This is what we have, ladies and gentlemen. We have t squared minus 3t minus 4 equal to 0. Is this the same? Is this the same as x squared minus 3x minus 4 equal to 0? We've been seeing this, right? We've been seeing x squared minus 3x minus 4 equal to 0. The only thing changing here is instead of the x, they put in a t. We saw this already. You see this already. How do you solve anything that involved with the square? Well, in terms of this thing here, we need to factor this out. And if we factor this thing out, do you agree that this is an easy problem? Why do I say easy problem? Because is there any number? We took the 16 out. Is there any other number in front of the t square? Hopefully you say there's nothing in front of the t square. So therefore, all you need to do is ask yourself, is there 2 numbers? And hopefully you got this right, because if you have this thing wrong, we are in trouble. You have a long weekend ahead of you. Is there 2 numbers multiplied to give you 4, but subtract to give you 3? And again, hopefully you guys say that is 4 times 1, not 2 times 2. 4 times 1 is 4, and 4 minus 1 is 3. And the bigger number will get the sign of the meter tone. Okay. So again, this is what we have. We factor this item out. We factor the item in my parenthesis. And now all I need to do is take each of the parentheses and set it equal to 0. How do I solve for t here? I need to add 4 to give me t equal to 4. I need to subtract 1 to give me t equal to -1. And I told you, because of the application problem, because of the word problem, we do not accept a negative answer. The reason is there is no way you shoot up the rocket and it take a -1 second. What does it mean, -1 second, and it hit the ground, right? We cannot, in math, in our class, we cannot use a negative number to illustrate time. We cannot use a negative number to illustrate a distance or a measurement, okay? For us, our problem will always be positive unit. So in this case, to answer this question is take 4 seconds. You stand on the top of the rooftop, 64 feet building. You shoot this rocket, it's hit up the air, and it took 4 seconds for the rocket to hit the ground. It cannot take -1 second. And that's why for application, for word problem, we not use any negative number to illustrate as our answer, okay? So one thing is, I know some of you probably say, well, Mr. Tran, what happened to this? What happened to this -16, right? One thing is, when you put a -16, and if you carry on down in -16, and at this step, is this ever be true? Is this ever be true that -16 equal to 0? It can't, right? It's never be true, because -16 is -16 and 0 is 0. So basically for this item, because of the application problem, basically because it's a constant, it doesn't have anything to do with the t, we kind of disregard it. Okay, basically we kind of disregard that 16 because it doesn't have any association with the t. We only deal the item associated with the t, and that is what we have. And again, let's do one more, and then I take your question. I know some of you have some questions. Some of you guys say, well, looking at this thing here, how do I, what do I do? But let's take a look at this thing here. And if you glance through this item, the only thing you see that relate to math is this item here. That's the only thing you see is h equal to a -16t squared plus 16t plus 32. Now, the story, if you're interested, the story is this, right? Someone on the flow, someone on the monograph flow, since we in New Orleans, right? Someone on the monograph flow, they throw the beam at you, and they ask you, given this equation that the beam flow in the air and travel to you, how long will it take for the beam to hit your head? Just can't hit the ground, right? If you don't catch the beam, it hit the ground. So looking at this thing here, doesn't matter what the story is. The only thing that associate with math, the only thing that correlate with math is this equation. The story can be any story they want to put in, right? But the only thing that associate with math is the equation. And if you remember what I told you is, all we do in anything relate to the height problem, or when you do your homework later, anything relate to the profit, the only thing we need to do is we need to take that equation, we need to extract that equation and set it equal to 0. Because the initial height of the beam, the initial height of the item relatively to the person who throw it, relatively to the person who launched the rocket, is equal to 0. So the height, the initial height for this particular problem is equal to 0. So since the initial height of this problem is equal to 0, this is what we have. which is whatever the equation is, negative 16t squared plus 16t plus 32 equal to, we set it equal to 0. Now, once you set it equal to 0, you want to ask yourself, can you factor out a negative 16? And in this case, we can take out a negative 16 because negative 16 going to negative 16 will give me 1 time. Negative 16 going to negative 16 will give me a negative 1t, and a negative 16 going to 32 will give me a negative 2. And this is what we have, is we take out a GCF. We factor out a GCF, the greatest common factor, right? We factor out a GCF. And now this is our focus point. Our focus point is now the item in my parenthesis, which is t squared minus 1t minus 2 equal to 0. And is this an easy problem? We did this by factor out GCF. We take the hard problem and make it easy. Why is easy? Why am I keep on saying easy? Because there's no number in front of the t squared. Again, the 16 is out. The 16 is on the outside of the parenthesis. So it's not 16t squared, right? There's no number in front of the t squared. And if there's no number in front of the t squared, what do we ask ourselves? Well, we ask ourselves, is there 2 number? And hopefully you guys don't have this thing wrong, because if you do, we're in trouble, guys. Is there 2 number multiplied to give you 2, but subtract to give you 1? Well, there's no other number except 2 times 1, right? 2 times 1 is 2. And in this case, 2 minus 1 will give me 1. And the larger number will get the sign of the meter term. And this thing here will be the opposite. So again, as you can see, we set the original equation equal to 0. We factor out GCF. And then we factor out what we have in the remainder of the parenthesis. And then what do we have? All you need to do is take this item. The first item set equal to 0. The second item set it equal to 0. How do I solve the t here? I add 2 to get me t equal to 2. In this case, 2 seconds. And if I minus this item, and as you can see, we cannot associate time with negative number. Okay, so in this case, the only answer we're looking for is someone throw the beam and it take 2 seconds to hit the ground. Okay, so looking at this item here, let me pause and ask you guys question with this particular problem. Question with the step, question with the procedure, or question on what we're looking for. All right, if you don't have question, let's take a look. Let's skip this one. Let's take a look at this one here. Similar to the one we have before. Let's take a look at this item here. Let me give you 5 minutes. See if you can set this thing up. See if you can attempt to do this problem here. Again, you don't have to know the story. Ask yourself, what do you have? And then from there, see if you can take the item and set it equal to 0. Oh, that's the t square, guys. Negative 16t squared plus 64t plus 81 equal to 0. Not 81, 80. Again, if you kind of stuck, reminder, we need to factor out the GCF. And like I mentioned, most of the time, consistently, most of the time, the number in front of the t square will be your GCF. And in this case, 16. For us, 16, negative 16. And if you factor it out, hopefully you guys see that the thing inside your parentheses is the easy problem. And again, hopefully none of you guys get stuck, because 5, there's only one number. 5 times 1 is 5, and 5 minus 1 is 4. But because it's a negative 4, my 5 have to be negative, and my 1 is positive. And in that case, once I have this, and again, if you saw this thing here, you want to keep it consistent. Whenever they ask you to solve, whenever you see the parenthesis, you set it equal to 0, right? I see the parenthesis, I set it equal to 0. I see the parenthesis here, I set it equal to 0. I see the parenthesis here, I set it equal to 0. And then now, because my problem have a t square, I have to factor. If my problem doesn't have a t square, then all I need to do is move in the item to the other side. And if I move to the other side, everybody see that this thing will be 5 seconds. So whatever the story is after 5 seconds, it will hit the ground, right? And again, this thing here, if you recognize that this is what we have, if we move the 1 over, that become a negative, and we cannot associate the time with negative. So again, this thing here, the underhand pitch will hit the ground, right? After a swing, it will hit the ground. After 5 seconds, it will hit the ground. Okay. So again, question with this particular problem, ladies and gentlemen, of where to start, how to start, and what is the answer we're looking for. All right. If you don't have question, let's take a look at the second portion of your word problem. And like I mentioned, this right here is the right triangle. And this is what I mentioned to you guys. The right triangle is you have to draw your right triangle. And again, reminder that your right triangle is this right here. It's basically your right triangle is your right triangle, imagine a straight line, right? Your right triangle is you have a 90-degree item right here, and this is your leg 1, and this is your leg 2. The vertical item and your horizontal item, those are the 2 legs, and the diagonal line, diagonal line, this is your hypotenuse, right? So looking at this thing here, this will be my A, or leg A. This will be my leg B, and this item will always be your C. The A and the B, they are interchangeable. Doesn't matter which leg, as long as it's a vertical or horizontal, is a leg. And again, the diagonal line will only be your hypotenuse. This will never change. The diagonal line will only be the hypotenuse. Okay, so this is what I mentioned. If you see the right triangle, to attack the right triangle, this is what you want to identify. Draw a figure. Identify what is the leg 1, or what is the A item, what is the B item, and what is the C item. And all you do is you plug into that equation, A squared plus B squared equal to C squared. And let's take a look at the problem. And if you take a look at the problem, this is what your typical word problem, right triangle problem look like. So if you look at this thing here, if you decipher this, well, clearly they say right triangle. So we know that we have to deal with a right triangle. So if you deal with the right triangle, just sketch, sketch your right triangle. It doesn't have to be precise. It doesn't have to be, nobody judging your sketch. Well, hopefully you don't judge mine. It's not that straight, but again, just give an idea. So what do they tell you? They say this, right? One leg of a right triangle is 12 feet. So again, let's say that this leg is 12 feet, right? Doesn't matter as long as we have a vertical, as long as it's vertical or horizontal, those will be my legs, right? So those are my two legs, the dot item. The length of the hypotenuse, reminder, the hypotenuse, they say that the length of the hypotenuse is 15 feet. Now they ask you, what is this item here? What is this unknown, right? So if I don't know, as in math, as in algebra, I put an X in this case, right? So if you remember, this is what we have is we have a square plus b square equal to c square, right? And my a item is this item here. My B item is this item here, and my C item is this item there. So if I know my A, I know my B, I know my C, do you agree that now, once you identify it, they tell you just plug it in. So if I plug it in, instead of say my A item is 12, and I just say 12 square. Instead of say B, my B item is my X, and my X is, I put in X and X square. That's what my B square. And instead of say a C, I say 15 square. So as you can see that this is what they ask you is, if you have a right triangle, we have to use the Pythagorean theorem. And the Pythagorean theorem just tell you that a square plus b square equal to c square. So you need to identify your A, your B, and your C. You plug into this thing here, and now hopefully this is a smooth sailing, which is, again, what is 12 times 12? 12 times 12, your calculator can help you out. 12 times 12 will give you 144. What is x times x? Well, x times x is the same x squared. And what is 15 times 15? 15 times 15 should give you 225. And look at this item here. You say, well, I have an X. Let me move this item to the other side. And if I move the item to the other side, do you agree that I need to subtract 144, subtract 144 to give me X by itself? And if I subtract this thing here, do you agree that this thing will give me 81? So if you subtract this and you give 81, let me cheat a little bit, right? Not really cheat a little bit. In chapter 10, the later chapter, this is what we need to do is, because there's an x square here, how do you get rid of the x square? Well, the opposite operation of the x square is, ladies and gentlemen, is a square root. So all you do is, if we have an x square and we want to get rid of the x square, we just take a square root on both sides. And for now, again, the rule is every time you take a square root on both sides, there will be two answers. One of them will be positive, one of them will be negative. And your calculator can help you. If you take a square root on both sides, your calculator can help you, because you will see that this square and this square root, they will cancel out. That will give you an x. And a square root of 81. Basically, if you type this in your calculator, this is under the square. If you hit second square, this will give you a square root, which is a square root of 81 is equal to 9. Okay, so this is what you can do with your calculator. You can take a square root on both sides, and you will see that the x, the answer, is equal to 9. Now, what we did, you probably say, well, that is something new, and I don't want to know anything new. Well, if you don't want to learn anything new, looking at this item here, do you agree that I told you guys that whenever you see an x square, you need to set it equal to 0. And how do I set it equal to 0? Do you agree that to set it equal to 0, I need to subtract 1 81 on both sides. And let's take a look at this item here. This is what we know. We know that every time there's an x squared, we have to see it equal to 0. And if we set it equal to 0, can you, if you look at the previous slides, this is what they tell you is we need to solve by factor, right? So can you factor this item here? Can you factor x squared minus 81? Well, is this a perfect square? Is this a perfect square? Do you agree that the perfect square here is x times x and 9 times 9? And if you remember x times x and 9 times 9, all you need to do is take one of each and put in your parenthesis, and one of them is positive and the other one will be negative. And looking at this thing here, you know, we see this answer over here. Do you agree that if I take x minus 9 and set it equal to 0, x plus 9 and set it equal to 0, right here is x equal to 9, and over here is x equal to negative 9. And remember, we cannot use a negative number as our answer because you cannot tell me that the distance from here to here is negative 9 feet, right? How can we express the distance from there to there is negative 9 feet? So that's what we have right here, ladies and gentlemen, x equal to 9, meaning this item that we have, this leg that we have is no longer unknown. This leg that we have is equal to 9. Okay, so again, the idea of this thing here, and I know the first time you saw this thing here, just like your height problem, the first time you see it, you kind of a little bit intimidated by it, right? You know, let's take a look at another one, and you can see. Let's take a look at another one, and clearly, right? Clearly, you will see that something relates to a right triangle, and if something relates to a right triangle, just sketch your right triangle, right? Sketch your right triangle. This is my right triangle, and again, to make it right triangle is a 90-degree. And looking at this thing here, what do they tell us? They say that one side, the length of one side of the right triangle, again, the side of the right triangle is 28. Doesn't matter what the unit is, 28 feet. And the hypotenuse is 53. Hopefully you guys see the hypotenuse is the diagonal line. And again, what do I know here? Well, I don't know because they asked me to find the unknown sign, right? If they give me the number, I know, but they don't give me the number. They only tell me one leg, one side is 28. It doesn't matter if you put the 28, if it doesn't matter if you put the 28 up here or the 28 down here, right? If you put the 28 down here, then this up here got to be your x, your unknown. So it doesn't matter, you know, as long as the side, as long as the leg is either the vertical or the horizontal line. The hypotenuse got to be the diagonal line. And to go back to our Pythagorean theorem, which is a squared plus b squared equal to c squared. And in this case, everybody see that this is your a, this is your b, and this is your c. And again, consistently the same, my a, instead of say a, I put in my x. My b, instead of say b, I put in my 28. And my c, instead of say c, I put in 53. And looking at this thing here, what is x squared? Well, x squared is just x squared, right? X squared is just x squared. What is 28 squared? Well, 28 squared meaning 28 times 28, and 28 times 28, it should give you 784. And what about 53 times 53? Well, 53 times 53 to give you 2,809, right? So looking at this thing here is very consistent like before, in the sense that identify your A item, identify your B item, identify your C item. And if you want to, again, you can subtract this thing over. And if you subtract this item over, you have x squared equal to 2,000. 25? 20, 25, right? So if you subtract this thing here, you get 20, 25. And if you have a calculator, if you see your calculator, all you need to do is you need to take a square root on both sides. And again, a square root of 20, 25, this thing should give you 45. 45 times 45 will give you, 45 times 45 will give you 2025. Again, I don't know it by heart. I cheated. I did it before. I did this problem 100 times already, so I know the answer. But again, if you don't see this, if you don't see the calculator, this is what you have to do, which is you need to move it over. And when you move it over, this is all you say is, again, 45 times 45, which you factor out, right? So in this sense, that's why I kind of skip, you know, if you have this thing here, we can go ahead and take a square root. You know, the next problem, you cannot take a square root, and then that's when we have to deal with something else. But for this one here, we can take a square root, and if you take a square root, you have the answer. You don't have to do the factoring, okay? You know, just common attraction, chapter 10, we will deal with a square root material. So this is what we have. So in the sense, you know, this, let me ask you guys question on the steps, question on how I derive to this answer. All right. If you don't have question, let's try one more together, and then I let you try this one here in a bit. But let's take a look at this one here, and it's a little bit different, but similarly, the similar item is, we know that this is a right triangle. So if it's a right triangle, just sketch the right triangle out, right? So this is my right triangle. My right triangle is here. And again, a little bit crooked, but it's okay. They say the length of one leg of right triangle is 15. So again, let me just put 15 somewhere meter, right? 15 meter. The length of the other leg is 9 meters shorter than the length of the hypotenuse. Ooh, we have something going on here, ladies and gentlemen. What does this mean? What does this item say? What is 9 meters shorter than the length of the hypotenuse, right? So this is different from the previous one. The previous one, we know that they tell us the hypotenuse is this, the length is that, we are ready to go. But this one here, we stumble in this item. So let me ask you, when you read this item, do you know what the hypotenuse is? Do we know the length of the hypotenuse? Well, clearly we don't know the length of the hypotenuse. And if you don't know the length of the hypotenuse, let's say that this hypotenuse is your x, because I don't know what the hypotenuse is. Now, if my hypotenuse is 10, then this item will be 1. Because why? 9 meters shorter than the hypotenuse. So basically, whatever my hypotenuse, do you agree that this item right here, let me change the color. Do you agree that this item, they tell me that the length of this item right here is 9 meters shorter than the hypotenuse? Meaning whatever my hypotenuse is, this item right here have to be 9 meters shorter than that. So if the hypotenuse is 20, then this item will be 11, because 20 minus 9 will give me 11. Everybody see this clock right here, 9 meters shorter than the hypotenuse, meaning whatever the hypotenuse can be 50, this item will be 9 meters shorter than 50, which is 41. If the hypotenuse is 18, then this thing here will be 9, because 18 minus 9. So that's the idea, is you have to take this wording. And again, you know, and this is where you guys dislike the wording, because how can you translate those words into something we know, right? And it's not the math, ladies and gentlemen, it's not the math, right? It's the English, right? It's all English here. It's nothing, uh, nothing Greek, right? It's math, right? When you convert to be math, but in the beginning, this is the English item, right? So a lot of you guys don't like the word problem because how can you take all this word and to translate to something we know like this? Okay, so hopefully you guys see. First of all, question on how my figure, how did I derive to my figure here? Question on how that I have the 15. How did I get the x? And how did I get the x minus 9? So if you have that, everybody see that this is what we have. Anything that deal with the right triangle, this is what I have. I have a square plus b square equal to my c square. And this will give me my a item, this will give me my b item, and this will give me my c item. And if I plug in, I have 15 square plus x minus 9 square equal to x square. Yeah, let me change the color here. X minus 9 square, right? So all I did was I took whatever they give me, and plug into my formula, my Pythagorean theorem formula right there. So once I have this thing here, if you look at the item, again, I will post this thing here on Canvas. If you look at this item here, they tell you that we did not have to do this earlier because we don't have anything that we need to FOIL, right? We did not do this earlier because there's nothing for us to FOIL. But this is what they tell you is once you plug into this equation, you have to FOIL if there is a binomial item. So let's take a look at this item here. Because we have this binomial, this is what technically, this is what you have, right? Everybody agree that 15 square is 15 times 15. Everybody agree, you can disagree. Now, disagree, now you're right. But you can disagree now, right? Do you agree that x minus 9 square is the same as x minus 9 times x minus 9? And this x square is the same as x times x, right? So basically, whatever the square, I just write it out, and this is what I have. Do you agree that 15 times 15, that will give me 225? And now let me work this item out here. Let me take this item and work it out on this side right here. Do you agree that x minus 9 times x minus 9, this is in chapter 5, which we need to FOIL them out. We need to FOIL them out, meaning x times x is x squared. X times negative 9 will give me negative 9x. Negative 9 times x will give me negative 9x, and negative 9 times negative 9 to give me a positive 81. So if you remember your special product rule, if you remember that x squared, x minus 9 squared, take the first term square, put the two terms together, double them up, and take the last term square, you can do this thing here a little bit faster. But if not, do you agree that this is my like term? So I have, let me erase this. So this is what I have is x squared minus 18x plus 81. Meaning this is what we have is we FOIL this thing out, and we FOIL that thing out, and this is what we have is we have x squared minus 18x plus 81. And again, do you agree that x times x is simply just x squared? So this is what we need to do, and this is the tedious of the right triangle is you have to kind of, they bring you the whole, around the whole world, right? They'll tell you to plug it in, they tell you to FOIL, and then they tell you to factor if you need to factor at the end. But look at this thing here. Before we do all that, we need to combine like term. Do you agree that this is my like term, my 225 and my 81, they on the same side? And if they on the same side, I need to combine my like term. And my like term, if I combine my like term, my problem is, if I add this together, do you agree that 60306? And again, this is what we have is if I add the 225 together with the 81, I would get 306. And once I add that item, now I know that because there's an x squared here and the x squared here, what do I need to do? Well, I need to combine them by move it over. And if I move it over, oh, ladies and gentlemen, life is a little bit better. Why is a little bit better? Because if you subtract the x squared, do you agree that x squared minus x squared, they disappear? And what happened here, x squared minus x squared, well, they disappear too. Meaning now my problem is just 18x, negative 18x, because of the negative here, plus 306 is equal to 0 because that disappear. The x squared and the x squared disappear. I have 0, meaning look at this item, ladies and gentlemen, there is no x squared. And if there's no x squared, how can you solve for x? If there's no x squared, do you agree that I can just move this item to the side? And if I move that item to that side, I need to subtract the 306. And what do I have? Well, do you agree that 0 minus 306 is negative 306? And how do you get rid of the 18? You divide by a negative 18, and this is your answer. You have x equal to a negative going to a negative will be a positive. And what is 306? What is 306 divided by 18? Well, you type in your calculator, you will see that that is equal to 17. So the 306 divided by 18, or in this case, a negative divided by a negative will give me a positive. And in this case, 306 divided by 18 will give me 7. And to add all this thing up, to finish this thing up, this is what we have, is they asked us to find the hypotenuse. So the hypotenuse is equal to 17. The hypotenuse is equal to 17. And this is what we have here, 17. And again, if we take 17 minus 9, everybody see that this length will be 8. So again, my hypotenuse is 17, and the other one, if they ask you, the other one is equal to 8, because 17 minus 9. Okay, so again, this one here, they only ask you the hypotenuse, so you only tell them that it's equal to 17. And again, I know you say, oh, Mr. Tran, this is a little bit tedious. And again, it's tedious in the way that it's a word problem, right? But one thing is you ask yourself, what is your figure, right? What is your leg A, what is your leg B, and what is your hypotenuse? Plug it in. If you have something square, you need to FOIL them. If you don't have anything, you don't have to FOIL, right? So again, this item here, you don't have the x plus something or x minus something, so you don't need to FOIL them. But down here, because you have an x minus 9 square, we need to FOIL them out, okay? So let me set up this one for you. Let me ask you guys to do this one here over the weekend. Let's say we have this item. And again, let me set it up for you, and then you guys can do it, because I think on your homework, they set up for you. Let me draw this. Again, doesn't matter how your right triangle is. So let's say that this is my triangle. Hopefully I don't confuse you, right? So my right triangle is this way now instead of the other way. So looking at this thing here, they say one leg of the right triangle is 6 meters. So it doesn't matter which one, we say that this is 6 meters. The other leg is 2 meters less than the length of the hypotenuse or 2 meters less than the hypotenuse. So do we know what the hypotenuse is? We don't know what the hypotenuse is, ladies and gentlemen, because they tell me that whatever this item, let me change my color, whatever this item is 2 meters less than the hypotenuse. So whatever this item is have to be 2 meters less than the hypotenuse, meaning the hypotenuse minus 2. Okay, so this is what they tell me. One leg of the right triangle is 6 meters. That's what I have. The other leg, this leg right here, is 2 meters less than the hypotenuse. So since I don't know what the hypotenuse is, I say that is my x. And because it's 2 meters less than, then therefore is x minus 2. And again, once you have this thing here, hopefully I did not confuse you, and that this long diagonal line is your hypotenuse, right? So this is long diagonal line is your hypotenuse, meaning this item is your C item, and the other two can be any A or B, right? This thing can be A, and this thing can be B. So look at this thing here. Everybody see that now you need to plug into this equation. You need to plug in A squared plus B squared equal to C squared. So in the center of this thing here, you need to plug into this item. So once you identified your A, which is X, let me color code it. A is your X minus 2 square. And again, plus B is your 6 square equal to your C square. So again, this is what you will end up with X minus 2 square plus 6 square equal to X square. So see if you can work this problem over the weekend. See if you can FOIL this thing out and then combine like term. And then again, the only reason why you need to FOIL is because of that X minus 2 square. See if you can FOIL them out, combine like term, move the X squared to one side and solve for X. Okay. So again, you need to solve for X, and to solve for X, we need to, if you have an X square, you need to set it equal to 0. And again, if they don't have an X square, you just need to move everything to the other side. So I will save this one here for you guys to see if you guys can do this. We will look more into this thing here on Monday. We will do more of this thing here on Monday.